For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ken Jones, Deputy City Manager. I'm sure Andrew will be down here shortly. These are great sessions that give folks the opportunity in our strategic planning process to present their performance measures and describe to you how they came to develop those performance measures, how they intend to meet those performance measures, where they are along the way, and most importantly, to get your feedback. We're in the development process still, and we will be for a long time in strategic management. So it's good for folks to give feedback on the performance measures that have been developed. So put these folks on the hot seat, ask them a lot of hard questions when they're done. And Jerry, are you kicking off the first one? Okay, Jerry Hart's going to kick off the first one. Thank you very much.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thank you for coming out for today's Tempe Accelerate. And as you can see on the screen behind me, I am going to be speaking about the general fund, unassigned fund balance, which is one of the key performance measures for the city of Tempe. Okay, there we go. This particular performance measure, as you can see, falls under the council priority area, financial stability and vitality. And that priority area reads as follows: maintaining long-term financial stability and vitality by focusing on economic development, business retention, and generating employment to create robust and diverse economic base. Now, I purposely underline the phrase long-term because we, as a city, certainly in our financial planning, it's imperative that we continue to always have the long-term view as a part of our planning efforts. The term or the phrase long-term also implies sustainability, and certainly the city wants to be sustainable in a number of different areas. We certainly have a lot of sustainability goals throughout the city when it comes to energy efficiency and things like that. But certainly, one I believe just as important, or perhaps maybe the most important, is long-term financial sustainability. And the reason for that is because, why are we as employees? Why do we come to work every day? And we come here to work to serve the citizens, to provide services to the citizen. And it's certainly important that all of us work hard each and every day to ensure the provision of those services into the future. Okay. All right. Okay, something's not right. Next. All right, thanks. Next slide. Okay, once again, the performance measure here. Oh, hold on a second. Well, why this particular, no, you can go to this one here. The particular performance measure is 5.05, and it is based upon a council adopted policies done in 2009 and again in 2013, where the council set the general fund unassigned balance at a minimum of 20% and a maximum of 30%, with a target of 25%. Now, we as a city have had this performance measure. I've been at the city for, this year will mark my 30th year at the city, and we have always, for the general fund, had a goal to maintain a general fund reserve of 25%. But like I said, largely based upon the last economic downturn, and I think many of you were here at that time, and you saw the impact that it had on the city. The city sought at that time to update and revise its financial policy, specifically with the unreserved fund balance. And that's how we arrived at the range that we have today of 20% minimum and a maximum of 30% for the general fund. Now, you might ask, why the general fund? And the reason that we have it for the general fund is because typically the general fund is the largest fund in any governmental jurisdiction. Most services at the local government level, in particular, most services are funded out of the general fund. Now, why this particular measure matters? Unassigned fund balance in the general fund basically is equivalent to emergency savings. I believe that most of us in here, if we are, certainly planning our household finances, know the importance of maintaining a savings account to address any unforeseen emergencies that may come up. This is the same concept here at the city as what our unassigned fund balance in the general fund represents. Now, the general fund is not the only fund in which we maintain a fund balance policy for, but once again, like I said earlier, because most of the city services are funded out of the city's general fund, and it represents the largest fund in the city, this is the reason why we selected this particular performance measure in an effort to achieve that council goal of financial vitality. Once again, why this measure matters? The general fund unassigned fund balance acts as an available resource during economic downturns. Number one, it allows for the preservation of services. And number two, it allows for the preservation of employee jobs. Also, the other important reason why we want to maintain this measure plays a vital and crucial role in the city's ability to maintain its excellent bond ratings. Right now, the city of Tempe is AAA rated. There's actually 3 major bond agencies that rate us. For 2 of the agencies, we do have a AAA rating. For the 3rd agency, our rating is just below the AAA, but it's important for the city of Tempe to maintain that bond rating and maintaining a strong reserve policy and also demonstrating the ability to comply with our own established reserve policy helps in a long way to achieving excellent bond ratings. And one might ask, why is it important to maintain excellent bond ratings? Because that lowers the cost of the capital projects that are constructed around the city, whether it be parks or wastewater improvements. All of these capital projects that we implement in order to effectively provide services to our citizens. And then lastly, why this measure matters is because it is a best practice as identified by the Government Finance Officers Association, or as known as the GFOA. The GFOA is an association of over 19,000 public finance officials throughout the United States and Canada, representing all levels of government. And the mission of the GFOA is to promote excellence in state and local government financial management. Lastly, one might ask, what's the appropriate level of a general fund unassigned fund balance? The GFOA best practice doesn't specifically designate what that level should be, but they indicate that the adequacy of the unassigned fund balance should take into account each government's own unique circumstances. And an example of that is, you all know that here at the city of Tempe, our major revenue sources are sales taxes and intergovernmental revenues that we receive from the state. Those are the major revenue sources in the general fund. Of course, as you all know, these revenue sources are highly susceptible to changes in the economy. Those revenue sources can be very volatile during an economic downturn, and because of that, an entity that relies heavily on such revenue sources may tend to need to set a higher reserve level or emergency savings, as I mentioned earlier. And for the city of Tempe, we have determined that appropriate level is, like I said, a range, a minimum of 20%, a maximum of 30%, with a target of 25%. Next slide. Now, It's working now. Now, this is some of our historical data as to what our unreserved fund balance percentage has been in the general fund for the last few years. You can see that for fiscal year just completed 16-17 and for 15-16, we're actually at 40%. We're actually at 40%. Obviously that exceeds our current maximum range of 30%, but I'll be addressing that a little bit later on in the presentation. And historically, you can see once again where it's been going all the way back to 12-13, fiscal year 12-13, it was down to 31%. I did not include this on this chart, but for fiscal year, I believe it was fiscal year 9-10, of course, we were dealing with the effects of the economic downturn. That reserve level had been drawn all the way down to 20%. Okay, what are the strategies that we employ here at the city to ensure that we're able to maintain compliance with this particular performance measure? Well, the most important strategies I have identified here on the screen, and that is the council annually adopting a balanced budget for the general fund that achieves that compliance. And certainly every year that our CFO and the budget office, working along with all of you, put the budget together, that is certainly something that is central in our focus to ensure that that we're at the end of the day in compliance with the city's financial policy and its performance measure. The other important strategy that we have here, just as important, the annual adoption of the budget is just a look at 1 year. What the budget office also prepares is, and presented by our CFO, Ken Jones, is a biennial 5-year long-range forecast. And the importance of that forecast, first of all, is presented to the council, as you all are aware, in October and February, so twice a year. And what that forecast does is it establishes the available resource parameters for consideration during the budget process. It basically lets the council know what resources are available now and projected into the future to accomplish providing the services to our citizens. And a critical importance of the long-range forecast is it allows the council and the finance office and all of us to see how a decision made today affects the city financially long-term. So you certainly don't want to make a decision without knowing how it's going to affect you positively or negatively, 2 or 3 years down the road. So it allows for better decision-making now. Just like the unreserved fund balance is a GFOA best practice, this 5-year long-range forecast, or long-range forecast in general, is also a best practice of the GFOA. Now, also, the third strategy that I have listed here is to identify opportunities to promote revenue growth while at the same time effectively managing the growth of expenditures. A key part of that is the efforts of our economic development staff. Now, our economic development staff doesn't do this all alone in a vacuum, but we all certainly work collaboratively together with our economic development staff to do what we can do to continue to grow and maintain the city's tax base, because that tax base is what provides us the opportunity, number one, to continue to provide the excellent services that we do to our citizens, but also at the same time enabling us to comply with our performance measure here in terms of maintaining our fund balance policy. However, implicit or underlying these strategies, particularly the first 2 strategies listed there, are the 2 fundamental principles, and that is that recurring expenditures must be supported by recurring revenues. And kind of going along with that is, conversely, non-recurring revenues should not be used to fund recurring expenditure. And as long as we continue to to abide by those fundamental principles there, the city will be able to assure that we're complying with our unreserved fund balance policy. And I think, believe it or not, this is my last slide. This is an excerpt from the recent 5-year forecast as presented by our CFO in the budget office just last month. And as you can see, it displays our projected revenues and expenditures, beginning with the actuals for 16, 17, and then it shows a forecast going out to fiscal year 21, 22. And you can see that based upon this projection here, at this point, we are projecting a gradual drawdown of that fund balance that earlier was upward to 40%. That drawdown of that fund balance ultimately down to 25%. So this is, and of course, the 25% is within the policy range, and in fact, it is our targeted fund balance ratio. And with that, that's really the end of the presentation. But how can we accelerate this measure? As I had mentioned earlier, we all, each one of us sitting in this room, all share in the responsibility of ensuring that the city remains in a strong financial condition. And going back, or harping back to what I said earlier, we can do that in a number of ways. That is certainly ensuring that we are in a position to continue the growth in our tax base, but also the important role that we as employees can play is continually seeking to find ways to deliver those services more efficiently and effectively. And of course, when I say efficiently, finding ways to deliver those services at a very economical cost. And with that, Stephanie has put up the website that shows our benchmark. You can see our historical benchmark information that was presented in the slide earlier. And with that, that ends my presentation, and I'd like to entertain any questions that anyone may have at this time. Come on, there's got to be someone with a question. Yes.
Does the state require the balancing of their budget every year?
Yes, state government, just like local jurisdictions, also have a balanced budget requirement. Of course, there's only one level of government that we all know that does not impose a balanced budget requirement on itself. Now, of course, if we had the ability to print money, now that might be maybe different. Gentleman back there.
What dollar amount does the 40% and the 25% represent of the budget? What is that tied to, or what does the 40% equate to?
40% of general fund revenues. So that is what, I'm sorry I didn't clarify that earlier. Yeah, it's the actual ratio is our unassigned fund balance divided by general fund revenues for that particular year.
Is there a dollar amount?
I believe, is it on the slide there? I think I can't see it from here that great. My eyes are not that great, but I believe it's around 79 million or so, if I'm correct. Yeah, I think on the slide actually. Oh, maybe it's there. Yeah, 79 million. Any other questions, Jackie?
Has it been any higher than that?
In terms of the dollar amount, I can't tell you if it's been higher than that. I believe fiscal year 16, 17, that dollar amount is the highest that it's been. Yeah.
Well, I didn't know Ken was here. I wouldn't have
Yeah,
asked that
I
question.
think, I believe in fiscal year 15, 16, we were right about the same amount, probably maybe 77, 78 million, somewhere around there.
Is the fact that we have so much left over in our budget, we're at this 40% level that's far above our target, is that why there's a ballot measure this year for Tempe to be able to exceed its spending limits? Is there a correlation between that higher percentage and that?
I'm sorry, no correlation
Okay.
there at all. And what you're referring to, we have on the ballot, I was going to say this month, today's March 1st, a request to the voters to approve a permanent base adjustment for the city of Tempe. And really, what that is asking the voters to approve is increase in the expenditure limit for the city of Tempe. The city of Tempe, as well as all, cities and towns and the county, an expenditure limit is imposed on each of those jurisdictions each year. This is something that was done in the late 1970s, largely in response to, how many of you remember Proposition 13 maybe in California? Well, I mean, the whole purpose of that was ultimately to try to control or limit the growth in government expenditures. And one of the things that the state of Arizona did was, in response to that, was impose an expenditure limit on the cities and towns and counties. And the city of Tempe is reaching the point where the state imposed expenditure limit. We're getting close to it with our spending level, but we have to go to the voters to ask them authorization, basically to exceed the limit as imposed on us by the state of Arizona. That just allows us to spend the monies that we're already collecting.
Okay, since I have the microphone, I'm going to ask a follow-up. So if that measure were to pass and the spending limit would go up, would that in any way help the city get back to the 25% because it's able to spend more money and won't have as much in the reserve? I guess I'm probably not understanding this because I'm a lawyer because I hate math, so sorry. And I'm going to give the microphone back.
Let me see, how did I answer that question? Well, I mean, there's really not a direct correlation between the two. Like I said, is because of the tremendous growth that the city has experienced since the Great Recession, the city has enjoyed an inflow of resources, many resources, one time in nature, and the budget office can probably attest to the fact that the reason that we're at the 40% now is largely because of one-time resources that have been received over the last few years directly tied to economic development. I mean, we have the State Farm project is a perfect example of that. And you guys just look around the city and you see these cranes that are going up. And so we have these huge development projects that are contributing in this short period for these, to these one-time revenues that we're receiving. So that's principally the reason why we see our sales exceeding that limit at this point. That's not to say that we didn't have growth in our normal recurring revenues. Certainly, we've seen increases in both our local sales tax revenues as well as our intergovernmental revenues received from the state, which is state income tax, state shared sales tax, vehicle license tax, things like that.
Hi, Jerry. Okay, so our goal is a 20 to 30% cone of prosperity.
Okay.
It's a voice from above. You can't see me. So if we're, basically above that high end of 30%, what are we doing with that extra money? Are we spending it down?
fact, you all are aware, and that's why it was important to put this 5-year forecast that Ken just presented to the council last month. And as you can see, that forecast does project spending that excess down until we get to the fifth year in the forecast down to 25%. I understand that, for example, during this current budget process, just for I think the general fund alone, correct me if I'm wrong, that I think there were over $11 million in supplementals that were submitted for council consideration. Certainly there have been some assumptions built into this forecast. Just to give an example of if the council ultimately did approve supplementals, you can see the effect, and that's the items in the red there on the screen. You can see the effect of those supplementals on our fund balance over time. But this is none of this has actually been approved by the council yet. But that's what we're going through the budget process right now. The council certainly understands, as I said from the beginning, what the available resources are to them to entertain these supplementals, and we're currently going through the process, the budgetary process, ultimately leading to the council decision on what they're going to approve as recurring as well as non-reoccurring supplementals going on into the future. Any other questions? Elva, I thought you raised your hand. All right, if that's it, thank you very much for your time and attention.
Shelley, we like math. That's why.
Someone has to.
Yes.
People are leaving. What? They don't like math, apparently, no. So,
Hi, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your day today to come and listen to the work that Mark and I and our teams have been engaged in to try to complement the work that Jerry's doing to optimize our capital budget and the performance of the capital program. I'm Marilyn DeRosa. I'm the city engineer, and
I am Mark Day from the Municipal Budget Office.
I wanted to start by trying to frame this topic for you. So where did this performance measure originate? Standard practice for the delivery of municipal and government capital programs is to size the CIP based on the organization's wish list and then hope that the staff can deliver it. And that's not unique to Tempe. That's throughout the industry, and it's not a very healthy or sustainable model. A couple of years ago, this organization asked, how can we collaborate to better understand the financing of capital projects and the delivery of capital projects to help better manage the capital program and the capital budget. And that's what we're here today to share with you, that effort. Our analysis of the program from soup to nuts, some strategies we're using to optimize the program, and some challenges that we've uncovered along the way.
Okay, so our performance measure aligns with council priority financial stability and vitality. And our measure is, as you can see up there, 5.09, so spend or encumber 90% of the annual capital budget funds, or CIP, in the year budgeted. So in the city, we have two budgets. We have an operating budget and we have a capital budget. So for capital budgets, those are your large dollar projects. If you think of constructing a building, paving a street, so we're talking about large dollar type projects. Our charter requires that we develop a 5-year CIP, but only the first year is adopted by council. So for example, this year, 17-18 is the adopted capital budget. So when we say in the year budgeted, that's what we're talking about there. And then when we use the word encumber, sometimes people wonder what does that mean? So that is an accounting term, and it means that the funds are reserved or obligated for a future expense. So for example, we've entered a contract or we've started work and we haven't received the invoice yet. So the project's underway, in other words. Okay, why does this measure matter? Well, the first thing is we really want to deliver projects as planned, right? So we've asked the departments to come up with asset management plans, and the maintenance of those plans are contingent on us completing projects. And it also supports the operational needs and goals of the department. So if we have committed to building a fire station, for example, with an expected completion date to meet their operational needs, and we're not able to complete that on time, that obviously causes concerns in the departments. It also, whoops, next one. Maybe not. There we go. Aligns the city's operational capacity to complete the project with the funding. So we have two components right of the capital budget. One would be that, or the CIP program, I should say. So you have the finance side, right? How are we going to pay for it? But we have to have the staff to be able to deliver it. So we want to make sure we align not just the financial side, but also our capacity or staffing to deliver those projects. And it optimizes our limited financial capacity. We only have so much funds available to expend on the capital budget, and what we don't want to do is commit funds to a project that maybe can't move forward or overcommit dollars where another project could have gone in its place. And it demonstrates to the public good financial stewardship, right? So we've established a budget, and the expectation is that we would deliver on those projects that we have in that budget. So how are we doing? Well, this is a peer city comparison. So this was the percent of the capital budget spent or uncovered for last fiscal year. There's a little asterisk next to Glendale. I know it's down there about 31%. They were only able to provide us with what they actually expended. They didn't have an encumbered amount. So we're sitting around 64%. Chandler has the highest, around about 72%.
So we collected this information and we sat and talked about what kind of strategies might help us to address that, that difference between our funding capability and our ability to deliver the project. So one of the first things we looked at was aligning the funding with the project phasing. So a project will have as many as 5 phases. It will start, typically it'll start with a study, then we'll go into scoping, we'll design the project, we construct the project, and then we close it out. We hand you the keys. So in this example, this project has taken 18 months from the time you provide the project charter to engineering to the time that we deliver the project. Traditionally, we've ensured that the money for the project is in the bank at project inception. But the bulk of the project expenses, you can see by this chart, take place near the very end of the project during construction. So you're holding money in the bank, spending very little of it at the beginning of the project, and then what you end up doing is carrying the funding over to the next fiscal year when you'll actually undergo construction and spend the bulk of your money. So by working with the partner departments, we're trying to better align the funding in phases to reduce the number of projects that carry that funding over from year to year. Another strategy is working closely together on a regular basis to evaluate our progress and identify where in the process or program we're not delivering as expected. And additionally, when we meet with the partner departments, we've been reviewing their entire capital program as opposed to treating each project as unrelated to the others. So it's just a new way of talking about the projects and programs. So with the departments, we've been meeting on a quarterly basis and having all the projects discussed in one setting. A third strategy has to do with staffing. It's actually, it's a luxury in this organization for the management team to really think about what your workload is. And is your staffing capable of delivering in this case, this program as expected? So we're taking advantage of that. We can't know our capacity and ensure adequate staffing levels, though, if we don't know how to measure or ways to measure our workload. And that's tricky because you need to first ensure that the right people are doing the right work. And once you've done that, you need to balance quantity with quality. You can force a lot of projects through the system but suffer with respect to quality. And honestly, we're still puzzling over what additional indicators we can use to help us find that, to use a sports analogy, to find that sweet spot. And then like many other departments, if our indicators tell us that we're losing ground, we can augment and have augmented our staff with temporary workers.
Okay, our fourth strategy is communication and training. So this is the first year we offered a CIP 101 course. And this course was designed to cover all aspects of the CIP because we have a number of employees that are involved in the capital program that really, maybe this is their first time working with the CIP, or they've been here maybe a little while and they're not sure of all the aspects. So we covered everything from budgeting, scoping, timing, working with engineering, procurement, budget, and IT. So we plan to offer that on a yearly basis. Also, engineering had pre-meetings prior to any proposed CIP projects being submitted to make sure we had the scope, timing, and cost estimates accurate and in the right years. And then also this year, we have what we call discovery meetings, and that's where we bring the departments together with budget and the city manager's office to go over all the proposed projects. But there are other stakeholders involved other than just the department, right? So if you are Public Works maybe submitting a project, there may be IT components to it. So we brought in the IT folks. There may be public safety components involved if you're proposing a new building. So we tried to involve all the stakeholders to make sure we had everything down as far as cost, scope, and timing. Well, we have a few challenges with this measure. So first of all, engineering is not involved with all projects. Some projects go directly through, let's say, procurement, and so they wouldn't involve the engineering analysis sitting down with Maryland's group. So that's one of our challenge. This capital budget is large. It's $174 million with 400 projects or sub-projects. So trying to hit a 90% with that big of a scope, that's one of our challenges. Projects can have unforeseen delays, right? Things we may have not thought of or things that come up, whether it's weather or maybe they're working on a street or something, and there's archaeological things that come up and it delays the project. So that's one of our challenges. And just the number of stakeholders involved. So it's not just one individual in one department that's managing the CIP. So there are a large number of stakeholders involved. And that is it.
Yeah, that's it. So do you have any questions?
There's got to be one.
Hi, my question is, what's a way for departments that want to put projects into the CIP or that have projects that are proposed in the CIP to get a jump start on the schedule so that that early work, that pre-scoping and all of that can happen early as opposed to after we get back from our summer hangover.
Right. So it's useful for the team that's going to deliver the project to know what's coming up. And we have a process, a project charter, and if you want to do have us help you with a project, submit a project charter. And if typically these projects, more and more, the partner departments are interested in having a study ahead of time. And a study is relatively low cost compared to the overall cost of whatever the ultimate project is. So it's worth the time for a project partner to have a small amount of money, a couple of years ahead of the time that they'd like to have the project delivered, come to us, submit a project charter asking us to conduct a study. And in that process, not only do you get you get a better understanding of what your project will ultimately look like, but you gain some momentum for the project, and you get much better cost estimates for what the project will ultimately cost. So having a study up front is extremely useful, and you would start that by having some funding available and coming to us, submitting a project charter and starting a study.
In August after they get back from.
If there's money available, I know where you're headed. If there's money available on July 1, sorry. If there's money available for your project on July 1, it would be very useful to start this study literally 9 months earlier. September, October. It's not too early. Honestly, it's never too early to come and talk to us about what your plans are for your capital infrastructure.
Maybe Ken can answer this, or Mark, as far as when is the, I guess, the red, yellow, green project document being presented to council? Because once that's presented, if it's something in the green, then more than likely it's a project that's moving forward, and that could even give people the green light to start the charter process.
Right, so Wendy's referring to, we have a process where the departments at this point have submitted all their proposed projects, but we have limited capacity, right, both on funding and the amount of staff that's available to execute the projects. So we do a process where we prioritize the projects based on council-approved criteria, and we present that to them in what we call a green, yellow, red list. And so what she's referring to is all the projects in green we're recommending to go forward in the capital program. Yellow would be they're right on the border. There's some discussion whether those could go up or down. If they go up, then something would have to be unfunded. And then red, we're not recommending to go forward. So if a project would be in the green, although it's not really, the budget's not officially adopted until in June. So, but if a project's in green, you're right. You probably should be planning that it's going to go forward.
I'd like to add that through this process in the last, probably just the last 4 or 5 months, when we started developing this next capital program, you guys have been really helpful. Community services, human services, parks, transportation, transit, all you guys, IT, all you guys that have been considering what your 5-year ask, even your 10-year ask have been really, really open to meeting with us, telling us what it is that you're hoping to achieve, asking us for support when you need it. And I feel like, now my mama raised an optimist, but I feel like we have a pretty good understanding of what the infrastructure needs for the department, or I'm sorry, for the organization are in the next, say, 5 or 10 years. And in sharing that information, in openly sharing that information and with us, we can then advocate on your behalf when we're having conversations about how to resize or how to balance things. I just feel like it has felt like it's been very collaborative. And I also appreciate that most of your departments have identified a point person for us to work with. And that has been a tremendous help. So, so I can go to Mary in community services, and she'll go out to her organization, get whatever information she needs to answer whatever questions we have. That's just an example. So I feel like it's been very collaborative so far.
I agree.
Anything else? Nope. The attorney's office didn't have any infrastructure requests.
Great.
Questions for Mark and Marilyn? Thank you all for coming out, and we have regularly scheduled meetings. Our next one is? They're thinking about that, but while they're thinking about that, on the back of your session review on the last page, you can fill out a form to give feedback on how you thought this went and how it can be improved. March 22nd, right here, with cookies. Bring your friend. And what? Okay, and water. Public participation. Okay, public participation and ADA transition plans. See you March 22nd.